Hello, where were we? It has been a while, and I think we're due for another one of these. Let's get into it. This is a good thing for talking over, so no sense in boring you with that menu screen. Forest of Hope, remember this place. I probably do, I've played this game 100 times, you might not, but no worries, simple game. But this isn't about the game, it's about me neglecting the hell out of you, people who like to watch these. Sorry about that. I easily work myself up into states of feeling like a lot is going on and I need to, I don't know, not do too much, feeling overwhelmed by nonsense. That's just me not being a very good provider or entertainer, whatever it is. There are people who think I have a lot to offer, and I frankly owe a lot better on account of that, I think, so yeah, I guess I owe you all kind of an apology. Sorry about being such a dickhead and not being punctual or accountable with all of this stuff. I know that some of you like what I have to say on a more formal level. You would like maybe some more serious and structured thoughts and kind of tolerate these as novelties to sometimes pay attention to. Others of you, maybe you just enjoy my talking for the sake of it, and yeah, I guess I have good news for both camps today, just that being that, yeah, what was I just going to say? That, what have I been up to? Well, you may, if you know me, you'll know that I've got text walls piling up all over the internet. I never stop writing or doing stuff. If you know me personally, you know that I haven't vanished, I've been around. Just if you mostly care about or pay attention to the YouTube stuff, you might be thinking, what the hell happened, where have I been? Sorry, again, just I let things get on top of me, I get overwhelmed very easily. Sorry about that, but good news, as I said, for both camps. One being that if you just like me being around and talking over and doing things, I intend to do a lot more of these, and I hope that you really enjoy them, because I do think that I have a good backlog of thoughts to get out, and it doesn't hurt to just make these. A lot of the time it's not like I'm doing anything better, so I should just be trying to, at the very least, entertain people as I pass time, because it's not like this is work for me. Like, I love Pikmin. This really shouldn't be something you have to, like, force out of me, so I intend to make myself do more of these. And other thing I was saying, that if you like more of what I do, like you like the stuff that I write more, you think that when I put work into thoughts, some more interesting stuff tends to come out, well, very good news there. I intend to, well, I say I intend to, I've already started. I am making what I intend to be, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought because I am actually playing this nice game which requires a bit of attention. Sorry, let me just get on top of this. Here we go, you can see me multitasking, powering through. I love this game. But yeah, what I was saying, I am actually trying to kind of combine what I'm doing here and the kind of more like forum-oriented stuff I do, where I'll like write something at length and try to just, you know, make just a sharp case study out of a certain thing I'm looking at. My intention is to basically combine those with what I intend to do is, sorry, I'm just tripping over my words because I'm doing two things at once. I'm out of practice a bit, or maybe I'm always like that, I don't know, but anyway, what's going on? I intend to basically make structured videos which are still running broadly on this kind of guided tour format. What I'm doing is I'm writing scripts up and recording footage for a couple of games which aren't on the channel yet, and rather than just piece by piece basically doing very verbose let's plays of them, what I intend to do is finish an entire playthrough, write a script, and then edit together something tighter, which I think a few people wanted from the start, which will be basically me doing something maybe closer to like one of those obnoxious genres of video essays, but what I'll be doing is basically very purpose-oriented. It'll be kind of an analysis of the particular work, an explanation of how to form a coherent analysis, and a kind of let's play from a very personal perspective, which serves as a kind of recap or whatever for that kind of audience at the same time. you probably know the big popular meme of like, you look up a video about a game and it's called a critique or whatever, and it's just a gigantic plot summary. I intend to basically self-consciously do both parts. I don't actually consider the summary element to be worthless in doing these things, which is kind of something I intend to talk about while doing it, which is, the particular game that I'm interested in, the main one, there are a few I have going, there's one I've resolved to actually finish. The main one I'm working on, I intend to basically talk about it at how it works as a game, only to a rather minimal extent, to make a point, which is that, well, you may have heard the meme phrase I use in a few places, which isn't really a meme, which is interactive multimedia. I'm basically going to look at a certain piece and explain it in that way, what happened with it, why people didn't like it, and I think they were wrong, and just kind of like using a YouTube video which as a form to basically appreciate the thing, like how I say I make a point of like appreciating by playing with Halo and a few others to kind of ground things, but I don't think that's necessary. The particular work in question, I'm sorry I'm talking around it, it's hard to be specific while also trying to keep it a bit of a surprise. The particular work in question I think can almost be better served by not playing it, and I actually believe that's true of a lot of games, so for this particular one it's almost like the opposite of what I'm doing with Halo and so on. My intention is to basically do a let's watch almost of a video game and just explaining all of the parts that you can't appreciate if you are caught up on playing it. And yeah, I've actually got like reviews that I'm commenting on from the time when this thing came out. It's an early Xbox 360 title which got kind of mauled by critics, and I read their reviews and they're basically doing like the gamer complex of like the gameplay is bad and like basically tunnel visioning in on the parts that you play with no regard for, you know, why anything is the way it is. I'm sorry, I can't talk indirectly about something without telling you what it is, which is absurd, so I either tell you or I stop talking about it. And yeah, I do want it to be a kind of a surprise. It'll be interesting, I think, to show it to you, and hopefully that won't take me too much longer to do. Write comments telling me you want to see it so I feel bad for not doing it faster if you want that done quick. We'll get there, but yes, I should stop saying that. What I meant to say was just catch you up that I am doing things and something different is coming, which will be me talking about a game which is, yeah, something more edited, my take on the video essay or whatever you want to call it, and it will hopefully be a lot more satisfying to watch than those. Hopefully we can dodge the problems which tend to make them a bit obnoxious and silly and make something a lot more worthwhile. And yeah, I've, as I said, been talking a lot about video games in general as well, so some consolation you can take in the time it takes me to get up and actually make one of these is, when I'm not doing this, I'm still thinking broadly about this kind of thing, so my backlog of things to say about video games is never going to run dry because I always take so long to get on it, and yeah, new thoughts are coming all the time, and there are things I haven't said yet, an absurd number of them, and this can just go forever. Now, speaking of, I should actually maybe talk about the game that has just been running in the background as my B-roll while I catch you up. This is more Pikmin, and I haven't even said everything that there is to be said about Pikmin. There's so much, it's so great. Oh, and something I meant to say like a month or weeks ago whenever I did this, is I played another early GameCube game which had been on my to-do pile forever, and it's very relevant to this one for a lot of stuff that it had going on, and I can talk about that and compare and contrast it with this, and that could fill out like another 20 minutes or so quite comfortably. It's something I really enjoyed thinking about while working through it, but I might take a breath for a moment here and actually, I feel like I've been talking non-stop for like half a Pikmin day, and I haven't touched on anything even remotely grounded relevant to what we're looking at right in front of us, and that's something I've been trying to do better with. The whole point of this talking about games in an articulate way while actually playing one was to ground them in the experience of playing them, which is, again, not necessary to appreciate them, but something so sparsely done that we probably couldn't hurt for someone intelligent to focus on it. So I'm trying to give that to you, of course, but lots of ways to appreciate a thing, and for the minute, what this video needs is me actually looking at the game. I'm sorry, it's been a long time, and as I said, the backlog of stuff to say is just getting silly. Okay, let's look at Pikmin, take 5, look at Pikmin. As you can see, it's been a busy Pikmin day. I was not doing much the first couple of days, and now I'm kind of falling into my habits as someone who knows the game well and just powering through lots of stuff. Hopefully you can kind of appreciate what I've been doing while I've been talking and see some of the nuance in this game coming out, the different Pikmin roles, and just how fun it is to efficiently clear through a space, or even inefficiently. Just Pikmin is a nice game to observe in motion, like a lot of Nintendo stuff is. It's just very prettily, very well assembled and lively. Okay, I have enough guys to grab that. If you don't remember the yellow Pikmin, you throw them higher because the idea is that they're the lighter ones. And there's a part. We're grabbing lots of ship parts today, we're doing quite well. I didn't quite have the explosives on hand to free that one, but it's practically there, and the game has 30 parts and 30 days for you to survive, so we're ahead of schedule, don't worry. We've already got our one piece for today to stay on track. We've just about got a second in, and we're just grabbing all kinds of stuff, doing very efficiently. But this isn't really a video about Pikmin, this is just a general update, as I was saying, and one moment. Pardon, sorry about that. Now, what was I doing? Yes, I meant to tell you about the other GameCube game that I played and compare it to this one. 1 second, sorry. Alright, sorry about that. I think that my voice tends to close while I do these things. I'm not really sure why. I'm trying to ease up on that a moment. I'm trying to just speak a bit more clearer now, hopefully take it easier on myself. I just kind of instinctively whisper in front of a microphone, I think, but yes, what was I saying? I was saying that I played a GameCube game, and that was The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. And I had a lot to say about that. I could almost bring it up just to show you while talking about it, but no, the points I want to make about it are broadly Nintendo appreciation points, so I think it can be appropriate to just do it right here while this is going, and yeah, just Wind Waker was further vindication of things that I already suspected and believed, which is always a pleasant feeling. Wind Waker has that, again, that trend that I feel like I identified when I was looking at the early GameCube catalog, which was a fascination with what we might call kind of fundamental forces, which is like, you know, how do I put this? Super Mario Sunshine was a game about, 1 second, we've got the funny glint bug, let's get him. He's getting away. Oh no, we got him. Oh god, he's drowning, my boys. Get out of the water, you little idiots. Oh, we didn't lose a single one, isn't that great? You can whistle them back. Just, it's a neat thing, they are very alive, your little Pikmin. And yeah, that's more to the point of what I was just going to say before I got distracted, that the GameCube in general was a time when, you know, you can tell they were really excited about this machine, so they were making games about primal forces in a way that wasn't possible. They were like, not tech demos, more like conceptual demo games in the sense of like, it wasn't about like, oh god, look how much like technical power it took to do this. It was more just the sheer novelty of, look, we can actually do this. Like, Pikmin is a rendering of nature with lots of alive, moving parts all doing stuff at the same time. And Super Mario Sunshine is the water game. Look, we have like fluid water that actually looks like water in a place like, it's on one level it's just water like this, and then on the other there's Mario's plumber backpack, which is, you know, like a hose, and you can do various things with that. Mario Sunshine is a game that's just about, on one level it's the fact that the water looks nicer, but you know, that's the kind of idiocy that we get in like PlayStation 5 launch titles too. The other thing is the fact that the water actually behaves like water, and that was obviously what they were more interested in, like the fact that Mario can actually project a stream of water and it will like hose down a surface. That was the novel factor, not like, look at how like realistic the movement of the water is. Like, look, there's like paint that he has to blast off of walls, and that's the whole point of the game, because the water actually does water-like things now. And of course, I think that's great and ambitious, and the greatest sign of artistry and ambition, because, like, yeah, maybe Horizon Forbidden West has technically more complex water that idiots like to look at more because it looks more like a Chinese concept art screensaver or whatever, but, you know, does it do anything water-like beyond just kind of be there? As far as I can tell, no. There's no, like, this water doesn't put out fire, this water can't be, like, bottled or moved in a vessel, it's not going to run down surfaces in any interesting way, it's just, like, basically a rendered screensaver. It's very dumb, whereas Sunshine was conceptually advanced in that it would actually do watery things, which is cool. And yeah, I think if you understand that, you understand why the Japanese are generally better at making video games, and why I think that if you're a halfway thinking person, there is just basically nothing to actually excite you in the state of Western video games most of the time, because, again, just conceptually, it's all junk. There's no actually cool ideas going on to impress. And, yeah, so Wind Waker is the... What was it I was saying? I am an idiot. Sunshine is the water game. Luigi's Mansion is the force of air game, suction blowing with the vacuum. It does vacuum-like things. Like, it's a big thing in a lot of games that, like, cloth is simulated, but often in that ugly way. Like, I forget what the technology is called, but there's that thing in Dark Souls, the From games use it in general, that makes, like, the coats flap, which looks absurd most of the time. As much as I like Japan, it looks silly. I prefer the stiff clothes in Evergrace and so on. Maybe like one part, like a scarf, will flow dramatically rather than affecting any kind of lame physics. But yeah, the most realistic kind of physics I've seen affecting fabrics, basically, is still in Luigi's Mansion, because, again, the forces of air are actually represented in a way that you don't see in any other game. It's the game where a man has a vacuum cleaner and he is able to actually, like, pull on a piece of cloth with it. Show me, like, the PlayStation 5 game that does that. It's not happening. Nobody is overtaking these, like, 20-plus-year-old games made for, like, the silly lunchbox machine. This should be embarrassing, but again, most people's conception of progress is so lame and just provincial that it doesn't really occur to them that they're being owned by the Japanese on this front. Because it's just progress in a direction they can't even fathom, which is, yeah, I sound like I'm giving white man a hard time here, or maybe perhaps the problem is that the Western gaming audience is actually mostly brown, but that's a whole other issue. Anyway, what I was saying was, yes, that it's all about conceptual progress, and The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker is about another force, of course, which pleased me, and yeah, which force was that? Your hint is in the title, but I never actually knew because I hadn't played it. The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker is the wind game, and I had no idea that wind is actually playing a massive part in that game in several levels, and the fact I didn't know probably speaks to the generally piss-poor quality of gaming discourse then, now, and forever, that basically people aren't talking about what's actually going on in favor of their popular memes about what's going on. Wind Waker is the, like, unfinished meme game where there's lots of water and it takes 500 gajillion hours to get anywhere, according to dumb people. And as always, the popular conception is wrong and missing everything that's cool or exciting or even just true about the thing in favor of a bunch of memes. The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker is, yeah, on one hand, it's the wind game. Link is constantly changing the direction that wind flows, which is very cool, and because it's a game on water, that's actually a very big deal. It's a game about sailing a ship, which actually has a sail, which means it has to catch the wind to move, which means... Don't you love how that guy takes time to go to sleep, so we have to do different things, and the time he takes to sleep is time that passes in the day? This game is just well thought out. But anyway, yes, Wind Waker. You sail on a ship at sea, and that ship is affected by wind, and you gain the control of the wind after a little bit in that game, and it feels like a very cool and powerful thing. Again, it's just all about manipulation of forces, Nintendo games of the era, and I think that's awesome. I love Wind Waker because it is actually about wind. I'm sorry, I'm a bit distracted. Wind Waker is the wind game, that is awesome, and what else was I going to say? Yes, just again, it's a primal force that is represented very well conceptually, even if they probably use some rather simple programming to get it done. And yeah, just the wind in Wind Waker does more stuff than I have seen in any Western shit game, which probably costs $1 bajillion more to develop, and has a lot more power even rendering its own wind, but there is no practical felt effect. Testament to the power of this thing that even on VR, I think, which has like the worst taste of all the boards on 4chan with regard to looking at video games. We just lost some Pikmans. As I was saying... Sorry, we're going to fight the Snagrets now. I'm going to actually talk about Pikmin. Aren't these bosses, like, awesome and scary? These giant snake birds that pop up out of the ground and kill my Pikmin, like 3 at a time. Okay, we've almost killed one, but this is not going well. These things are kind of horrifying when you don't know the game well, because you just don't see them coming and they kill the absolute hell out of your poor Pikmins. Okay, between the bridge approach and this fight, we are down to 69 out of 100. I told you we would take attrition, didn't I, at some point? Well, here it is. We are taking losses. Don't pick things up, guys. Time is of the essence here. We have to kill this thing. Oh, they got it. We got a bunch on its head. I'm sorry. I'm thinking in 100 different directions at once. I have to kill this thing. I have to keep my Pikmin from wandering off. I have to tell you guys why Wind Waker is so great. Let me kill these, and then we'll get back to Wind Waker and how that ties back into Pikmin. Get him, get him, get him. Nice, we did it. Okay, I reckon there's one more head of this thing we have to take out, and then we'll be set. There he is. Isn't this a fun game? I hope you enjoy watching all of this chaos and silliness. I do think Pikmin is an inherently fun game. It's a shame that people don't, think more of making a spectacle out of it. It's another tangent we can go on while I do this. It's strange which games get kind of picked up by YouTube's algorithms and popular taste as ones which are worth, basically making a show out of. There are lots of videos about games like Fallout New Vegas and the Fallout games in general of, trying to find interesting ways to play them, which is good. I think it's kind of an evolution of what was the best part of, the phenomena of speedrunning, which I think most people were never really interested in the sheer fact of going fast. I think that part was always kind of incidental to what is actually cool, which is just finding interesting ways to play a game and show people something they already knew in their own ways. Speedrun is only really interesting to me, and I think most people, in as far as they're actually doing something interesting that you haven't seen before in the game, and I think that the proof of that is that they've been kind of supplanted and taken over by these videos of can you beat Fallout New Vegas without I don't know, using your inventory or something. That's the kind of thing that gets more views on YouTube now than beating the game in 2 minutes just by glitching through walls or something. That's just not very interesting. Maybe it's novel to see happen once and then just who cares beyond that, frankly. Looks like this guy ran off ahead of the pack. That's fine, he got another friend. Let's pull a pile of them out now to save time. Now, sorry, I don't really mean to go on that tangent there. I'm sure you already understand what I mean. Just the short answer on that is that I think that the development of eccentric challenge runs on YouTube, even if people kind of mine it for the old content, whatever they want to call it, I still think it's ultimately a healthy thing that's happening, that people are divorcing the idea of interesting from speed, because that was always kind of a historical accident. The speedruns got a lot of views for basically every part but the speed. I think it's pretty obvious that that's what was going on, and yeah, that's a little thought tangent that I can get out easily while focusing on other stuff, and that's all I have to say on that. And here comes my giant convoy of Pikmin. I don't know if I told you, in fact I don't think I did, this came up while I was arguing with some people somewhere. If you read old interviews with Shigeru Miyamoto, Satoru Iwata, and the other guys who were big at Nintendo and overseeing and leading the production of this game, what they say is that one of the key ideas that inspired them, I remember now, why I was looking into these interviews and getting these quotes is, don't you love that the parts appear on the ship one by one? Anyway, yes, why I was digging up quotes about Pikmin was an argument on some part of 4chan or other. We were arguing over just basically whether Nintendo intended to create iterative genre games or whether they basically, their games emerge from a kind of idiosyncratic artist-style vision, and yeah, this might have been in the context of something like The Legend of Zelda. Why I argue with a lot of people is basically that, like, saying whether or not it succeeds as being like a role-playing game with action-adventure elements is an idiotic thing to say because they're basically not trying that. These are just value-loaded terms, which this is something I'm actually planning on doing possibly in the near future, is writing some things to kind of harass some leftist gaming industry people by just outmaneuvering them to the left with their own language as a form of mental exercise. This is something I sincerely believe, but it sounds like something they should believe and would if they had any integrity, which is that saying things like criticizing like a game like a From game or The Legend of Zelda as like an inferior roguelite role-playing game, adventure, Vania, open world, whatever the fuck. These are just like value-loaded terms which we come up with retroactively to describe things that we already like, and using them as sources of value and why something should be liked after that is basically insane, and the fact that that's like the standard accepted form of like how to do criticism in the West is like not only a sign that we're like brutally dumb, but like basically insane in that we like believe language creates value at this point. I don't know. Well, I shouldn't say that. No, I do know. It's, again, these are things that we create after the fact to, well, basically it's marketing language for the most part. Like, what is a survival horror? What is survival horror? What is adventure? What is roguelike? What is RPG? It's something you use to sell to people, basically. It gives you no insight into the... Unless they explicitly say so, you should take it that you are not actually gaining any insight into the state of the mind of the person who made the thing when you say, oh, well, this game is good. How is this game as an RPG? Unless the person making it says, I was looking at things which were called RPGs to make this and I wanted it to be, you know, so-and-so. Even then you have to refer to the person in question to understand. What was I saying? How did this come up? Nintendo games, yes. People on 4chan are idiots and they try to say like, oh, The Legend of Zelda is a failure of an RPG or something. And what I was just saying is like, yeah, they were trying to make like an RPG or something. Like, look at what they actually say while they're making their games. They never say like, oh, we wanted to create an iterative advance in the RPG genre or something. They have like, what every Japanese guy basically talks about making video games in the same way that Peter Molyneux does. And Peter Molyneux is one of the few white guys who leads a lot of video game productions who we can actually remember the name of, which is one thing that's interesting, and I just find him lastingly interesting over time in a way that I don't most others, because yes, he has something in common with these Japanese men, of course, is what I'm getting at, and that is that... Sorry, where am I going? Peter Molyneux is a man who thinks like an artist, not basically a copying engineer working to a template. He has a vision which has nothing to do with the mechanics of how a video game works, which he wants to realize through a video game. He'll say like, oh, I had the idea of a bunch of guys running around inside this little ant maze-like structure, and then that became Sim Hospital, and that became Dungeon Keeper, and so on. Things like that he'll say. And yeah, if you look up, I had a particular interview up of Satoru Iwata, Shigeru Miyamoto, and so on, and they were talking about Pikmin, and yes, what they said, they were not saying like, oh, we wanted to create a like roguelite real-time strategy game. I think some of the idiots on 4chan were saying things like that, which are just like factually untrue, and saying like, oh, well, it's a failure as a real-time strategy game, and well, yes, why that is a just like absurd, like monstrously absurd thing to say is like, you're saying that it failed at something which it wasn't trying to do, which is just kind of like insanity, and as obnoxious as it is to say, it's a kind of racist insanity where you're assuming that like your culturally inherited, like what your culture values, basically like white man video game think, is like the only valid source of value. So you're looking at another culture which is trying to do something different and yeah, just like saying that they're doing a bad job because they're not doing it what you would have done, and it's just so wrong. It's like an analogy I wrote up in something that I might publish somewhere eventually is like the state of game criticism in general. It's like the stereotype of not getting another culture is like a redneck in a trucker cap or something, but this is like very much a like leftist white nerd thing, which is to be like the idiot who like stands up in a no play and says, why the hell are they talking like that? Like, that's how people talk about things like Pikmin, just like, why are they doing different things than I would have? This is like being a failure of a real-time strategy. It's not a real-time strategy. I'm sorry, to finally get back to the point with the interview, Satoru Iwata and Shigeru Miyamoto, what brought this back to my mind was the train of Pikmin carrying items up through there, is they had this image in their mind of course the first thing I've said is they were talking about how they had just little men running around a screen, they could make them do things, and they saw them carrying, and that was like the start of the game. More particularly, they said they had this image in mind of a group of cavemen fighting a mammoth. Isn't that a striking image? They thought, okay, we want a video game to capture this like idea, this premise, this image which has fascinated us, which is the idea of primitive man just like circling around this massive monster so much bigger than them and bringing it down. Pikmin is a game which is an attempt at realizing the aesthetic feeling of the aesthetic sensation, the image, the idea, whatever you want to call it, of men bringing down a mammoth. And from that starting point, rather than the idea of like, what if we made a game like Command and Conquer, but there's no base and there's a time limit? Like, an idiot who can only think in received terms from his own culture might say like, yeah, obviously the point of Pikmin was to like rip off Command and Conquer, but mess around with the idea of like base and resource collection. No, Pikmin came from a group of eccentric men thinking, men fighting mammoths is a cool idea. How do we like make a game that feels like that? And basically starting from there rather than the history of existing video games, even though surely that would have influenced them. I don't mean to say that like a real artist isn't aware of anything that existed before, but they had an idea they wanted to bring to life through a video game. They were not thinking, video games exist, we make video games, let's iterate upon things which exist. I hope that made a kind of sense. Now, the other thing I wanted to say, I'm sorry, to bring it back to Wind Waker again, the idea of force affecting an environment is really, really cool, and yeah, Wind Waker does that very incredibly with this idea that you're on a sail ship which is powered by wind, and yeah, you control that wind, and it's a very cool feeling that like the sail of your ship turns and you get blown in another direction when you change it, and something I appreciated more and more as I went on was the amount of things that just were incidental that were also affected by wind in that game, like how in Mario just water is affecting everything, and in Luigi's Mansion wind is affecting everything. In what is this? I'm sorry, I'm getting all the titles confused. In Wind Waker, here are the blue Pikmin by the way, admire their introduction while I keep talking. Wind Waker is just all about showing off this idea of like wind as a force which affects everything even when you're not conscious of it, which is why it's cool that they now have a game where they can mess with that force, Wind Waker is the game about wind, and like Link's hat is blown by wind. Every bridge in the game is a rope bridge. Why? Because a rope bridge will sway in the wind. And there are like lots of birds and stuff flying around that are affected by the wind. Everything is just like, there are flags and pennants that get blown around. The game is just absolutely full of things which react to wind in this beautiful way that really sells you on the idea that wind is this all-present, always, even if not on your mind, always present thing, and it's like amazing that they can now consciously do stuff with that. And yeah, that's why I really loved Wind Waker, and again, this is just so characteristic of the early GameCube era to be conscious of a force and like this conceptual awakening of like, okay, these things, we can now do things with them. I'm sorry, I have to deal with this bastard bug thing. Youch. Okay, you know what, we'll just let him have that one. Anyway, I was saying, yes, Wind Waker is the wind game, Pikmin is the, like, mass and nature game, nature coming to life. That mammoth just stole our thing, by the way. Again, it's like a little simulation of an ecosystem. Western games will, like, jerk themselves off over how much, like, code went into it, but functionally you get something that doesn't work. The behavior of the wildlife in Pikmin is very simple. It's not actually a functioning ecosystem, but it's enough of one to work, so why the hell should I care? And yeah, that's just a very typically Japanese approach as opposed to the Western one, as I hope has been articulated by now. I'm sorry if I repeat myself, again, that's why I'm working on edited videos, so you can, if you care to, just get each Anthony fought once in isolation, hopefully, but as well, you haven't heard me in a while, so if there are any of you who just like listening to me at length, hopefully you don't mind so much, and this video is just a nice thing for you, and I'll make a couple more soon. But yeah, so we've got the blue Pikmin now. They're going to be kinda useful now, and extraordinarily useful in the near future. I am in a bit of a dangerous spot now, sorry. I have to pay a touch of attention to this. I lost one of my precious blues to these, but we're going to come up profiting, I think. Also, something interesting is going to happen with that scavenger we just grabbed. He's going to actually get beaten up by our thing as he gets dragged into it. That's kind of the trick to beating him up. And let's see if we can do it again. This is a very funny interaction. I'm sorry if I keep losing my chains of thought. I'm not the greatest host, I know. But again, this isn't like a... These are just the experience the game at Anthony's pace kind of vlog videos. It's almost like me doing a DBDR thing, almost, I kind of want to say. I may have told you I considered buying that game, but I feel like it's too expensive and the file size is too big for what would basically be a one-off joke. Me playing the DBDR game, but... yeah, I hope you enjoy these, where I just kind of... You experience the pace and trajectory of my thought, which can get very lost because there's a lot of things I could be talking about at any one given time. But yes, the other thought related to Wind Waker, which comes out of it, is... what really struck me that I think nobody talks about, and it's proof that people are not that sharp, that this doesn't come up constantly, is that Wind Waker, The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, is like 3/4 of what Breath of the Wild is. Like, it's really stunning how many features people say, like, again, the Western, like, ethno-narcissism basically is the word for it, unfortunately. Like, white people just become kangs when it comes to video games, like, unironically 100%, it's just like, yeah, we invented this, we did this, when, like, very obviously there is a separate intellectual and creative genealogy which has nothing to do with them, which is the actual source of everything which is being talked about at the time, unfortunately. White people are kangs when it comes to video games. No other way around it, I'm saying it. While the Japanese are, of course, the ones actually doing everything. Wind Waker, people attribute a lot of features to the open world genre, which is, of course, a phrase I find completely idiotic for a bunch of reasons. Basically everything which is treated like a stunning, brave white man innovation already existed in Wind Waker in a pretty much finished form, which was just waiting for tech to catch up. Like, Wind Waker felt like this amazing drawing ahead of conceptual ambition that like hit the ceiling of what was possible with the GameCube, basically. And then after that, I feel like Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword were like basically little diversion projects which existed to kind of keep people happy while the technology caught up to basically make a true sequel to Wind Waker, which is what Breath of the Wild is. It's basically Wind Waker 2. Now they can afford to do more and they have the power to settle on land. And yeah, like there are some real striking examples you can draw, like the fact that you have to like fill in your map piece by piece by doing like a little simple task in every area in Wind Waker. People say like, oh look, they've stolen the Ubi slop. That's a whole other tangent that people love talking, like fat Californians, like disgusting words like that. Anyway, I don't mean to complain too much about stupid people right now, I'm just saying that, yes, the key point is that there is basically a false creative genealogy with regard to The Legend of Zelda, which is, on one hand, very just language-focused, this idea that, like, terms we create retroactively to describe things are taken as the source of those things because people are almost irredeemably stupid. And I'm sorry, this is a high-tension situation. That frog could kill us all. Look at me multitask, tearing these things apart. I'm sorry, I'll need a minute. I have so many thoughts that I want to share with you. It's kind of stressful how much I want to say. This is something that's good for writing. I can get it all down at my own pace and then rearrange it later. And of course you can do that with videos too, with the power of editing, but who can be bothered editing? Certainly not me, unfortunately, so you're stuck with this unorganized mess that I'm sharing with you right now. But, okay, give me a moment to mentally catch up with myself and remember what exactly it was I was just trying to say to you. Yes, Breath of the Wild is a conceptual, spiritual sequel to Wind Waker, and again, to tie into kind of the false understanding of Pikmin that it's an installment in this thing we call real-time strategy for whatever reason. Breath of the Wild is not an open-world game, it is a Nintendo game and a Wind Waker game, and most specifically, it is a kind of a coming back to the early GameCube spirit, or basically picking up on the promise that they left off on, where, again, they basically hit the ceiling of what could be done with, like, tech and skill at the time. And it's not like they were, like, abandoning a race or a fight because everyone else was so, like conceptually lazy that they weren't even in it, if you understand what I mean. Like, in terms of representing, like, ambitious new things in virtual spaces, nobody else was even competing with Nintendo's ambition on the level of what the early GameCube was doing too much. Especially, like, as far as white efforts were going on, they were mostly just abandoned pretty quickly for the sake of, like, the graphics grind, basically, whatever you want to call it. And where was I going with that? Yeah, Breath of the Wild was basically them saying, okay, we've made our kind of like intermediate things, we messed around printing money with motion controls and so on, now we have to just like, basically, okay, nobody else is like even bothered approaching what we were doing in that kind of like downtime, so let's just blow them all out the water again with Breath of the Wild, which is, I'm sorry, to circle it back around as I was saying, Breath of the Wild is basically another like GameCube style launch game where they're thinking, okay, let's look at these like primal things which can be done in a video game which, you know, you've never seen before. It's not going to be like a computer simulation of the laws of reality, but god damn it, it's going to feel like close enough to be really fucking cool. And that's what they did with Breath of the Wild. It's basically Wind Waker again. As I said, in Wind Waker, like, the rope bridge sways when it gets hit with wind. In Super Mario Sunshine, there's like there are paint-covered surfaces, you blast them with your hose to rinse that off. In Luigi's Mansion, cloth gets caught in your vacuum cleaner. what is Breath of the Wild but a game just made top to bottom out of that kind of detail on as many fronts as they could manage all at once? If you understand what I'm saying, you understand what I mean by, like, the actual creative genealogy of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which has, you might note, absolutely nothing to do with, like, anything which is actually attributed, to which its success is actually attributed to it. Again, if you actually listen to, like, a white person talk about it, there's no way around it. They're pulling a fucking We Was Kangs. They're saying, like, yeah, this is a Far Cry 3 Vania born, like, they're basically copying the brilliance of just this, like, disgusting third worlder shit game garbage, like, fucking, again, just, they look at it and they think it's like a cross between World of Warcraft and Far Cry 3, because there is something, frankly, if you really want to, like, concern troll the fuck out of people, you can just say, like, if you believe that, you are racist. Which I think is actually true, in addition to being a funny thing to say. So, I'm sorry if that got out of hand, but yes, real creative genealogy of Breath of the Wild, to put it in short, is spiritual sequel to Pikmin, Mario Sunshine, Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. And again, it goes all the way back through The Legend of Zelda. There was a 4chan thread while I was writing about this. I could have made a proper forum one, I don't know, just recycle all this stuff I wrote there with less attacking the idiocy of 4chan in general, more just trying to be informative for you nice people who I don't feel the need to insult so much. Isn't it great, again, we've got that... I just love the trains of Pikmin carrying stuff in this game, it's so cool. Very nice to look at. I'm sorry if I haven't been focusing on the Pikmin. We can do that more as I calm down and have less backlogged thoughts to share with you. But, yes. Do you understand what I mean when I say that Breath of the Wild is a conceptual sequel to... I like that word, conceptual sequel, rather than spiritual or thematic. There is a conceptual current of ambition in representing forces that runs through all Nintendo games, I believe, and The Legend of Zelda, I think, was always where they did this most strongly, and it was always the true trend. You can explain basically everything that's going on in them by, you know, successive attempts at realizing, running along this trajectory rather than whatever the hell, like, idiots think they're seeing. Far Cry 3 when they look at it, basically. Yeah, and how do I put this? Like, what I wrote in the thread was like, Breath of the Wild, you can see that Nintendo were excited by having fire that behaves more like fire. It's not perfect fire, of course it's simulation, nothing will be, Baudrillard and all that, but like in Ocarina of Time, you can tell that they wanted to represent fire, but they could only do so much, so what they settle on is like a tool which is tagged fire, which there are certain objects or entities in the game world as well which are tagged like interacts with fire. And when the thing tagged fire hits that, you get like a little animation of the thing burning, and you'll have like puzzles, which people like calling them in a totemic, unhelpful sense, where you have to like hit a tapestry with an arrow that's on fire to burn it to reveal something that's behind it. And people will look at that and say, hey, like, that's real Zelda. You're like in a room with a one-to-one like problem and solution, but no, I think if you can look behind what's actually in front of you, the intention, the real Zelda, as it existed in the mind of the artist, basically, I think that's the only sane way to describe the real anything in art, what was meant to be there, or all that matters anyway. What was going on in The Legend of Zelda was basically an attempt at making Breath of the Wild all along, and yes, what were the dungeons is probably the best way to put it. What is a Legend of Zelda dungeon but like a compromise move, because they can't just show you like living nature. It's a little lab-like space in which they can basically show you a bunch of controlled, scripted demos for what they wish they could be happening under more organic circumstances. Again, fire arrow hits tapestry, it catches fire and burns away. They do that because they can't just model fire, model a world which can catch on fire, and then just set you loose to piss around with that. I think very obviously they would have preferred that, and Breath of the Wild, they abandoned the dungeons because they don't need them anymore. The lab experiment has now gone live, and I think it's just testament to the idiocy of gamers, the overwhelming idiocy that they say, oh, Zelda has betrayed what it is, it has become Far Cry 3 because there are no dungeons. Just like, no, fuckhead, go back to Mexico, get off my internet. The entire game is a fucking dungeon now. Use your brain. You like solving problems in, like, how do I even put this? People like the contrivance, which is very disappointing to me, and I think would be disappointing to Nintendo if they would, like, realize that. Maybe they do, I don't know, but I haven't played Tears of the Kingdom to see how they responded to the reception of Breath of the Wild, but it's very upsetting to me that people just don't understand what's going on. Like, no, if you were a serious thinking person, you would understand that everything that is in the dungeon is now everywhere. All that you could possibly like in the dungeon is the more contrived and linear nature of the thing, in which case, if you like that, you have virtually every other goddamn video game ever made to enjoy that, so just don't play these. They aren't for you, and frankly, they were never for you, and you were basically a fake fan if you think the dungeons were the spirit of Zelda, and yeah, just go figure. All of these dumb people, they say you're a fake fan if you don't want dungeons back, because nobody can read the creative genealogy of these games, because everyone's a fuckhead but me. I am the only white person who can understand how Japanese games get made, apparently. You're free to disagree, but my creative genealogy is the one that does not have gigantic glaring holes in it. If you disagree, please leave a comment pointing one such out. I would be happy to go into it with you. In fact, I'd very much like that. Now, what was the point of this video? I guess to catch you up, but as always, I have a gigantic backlog of thoughts to get through, and I hope this wasn't torturous for you, this pained back and forth between trying to pay attention to the game and wanting to tell you like 20 different things at once, all of them getting tripped up over each other. But yeah, if you hadn't heard me for a while and you wanted to hear me, here's like an hour of me talking so much I can't keep a single thought straight. I'll call this one here and hopefully have another one lined up for you very shortly. Hope you enjoyed this, and again, if I didn't say this already, thank you for all the nice comments. I do read them all, and they do mean a lot to me. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed this.